Hello everyone, and welcome. In this series I'll be showing the complete build process of this RC 125th scale 1991 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. In this first video I'll be unboxing the model kit, doing a little body work, making a custom hood, and applying primer. This was a really awesome build that I'm very excited to be able to share with all of you. And remember, if you'd like to do a similar build yourself, please check out some of the links below in the description for the products and STL files used. With that said, let's jump right into the build and start by unboxing the model kit that I'll be using for this project. This here is an older AMT Ertl kit released back in 1990. They're kind of hard to find now, especially for a reasonable price. I managed to score this one here that was complete aside from missing the clear T-top pieces. Certainly the first thing I noticed was the box, and everything inside of it had the most pungent stale cigarette smoke and mold smell I've ever smelled outside of a 50-year-old trailer home. I had this box sitting in my office, and I could smell it clear as day from another separate room I was working in, probably 40 feet away, and after removing it from my office, the smell remained for the rest of the day. No idea what pit this thing was plucked from, but looking at the glass half full, it does kind of remind me of the scent of a typical 3rd gen Camaro interior, so it's kind of gotten me in the mood to build this 91 Z28. Being honest, the parts are alright, it's an older kit, and you're not going to see the details and mold quality of something like the 2010 Revell Mustang that I built previously, but this kit I got was nice enough. They do include some bonus parts if you want to build a custom version of the car, which is always cool. In my opinion, it's not as good as the '83 Camaro Z28 that I built a while back, which was a more recent re-release by AMT. Unless you really want to build a later 3rd gen Camaro, I wouldn't recommend this kit for the $60+ that I see a lot of places selling these for online. If you can score one for like 20 to 30 or less, then go for it, but I feel like for 60 you can do a lot better than this kit, but of course that's just my opinion. Not many decals are included, but check out those shape stripe things. Seriously, if one of you puts that nice and big down the side of your full-size car and sends me a pic, I'll mail you a t-shirt. Now there was one kind of annoying flaw with this kit, and that's the front end of the body looks like someone jumped the car over a creek. The front somehow got bent on the right side. There's quite a bit of flashing and some work will be necessary to get it looking nice, though not bad overall. Again, the quality and detail of most of the parts was good, but nothing spectacular. Right away, I wanted to sort out the front end. I started by running the body under hot water and gradually bent it into the correct shape. I didn't have access to a stove, but if I did, filling a pot with water, warming the body inside the pot, and bending it would use a lot less water. Now after messing around with it for a while, I was getting it looking pretty good, but when I decided to try using a lighter, yeah, not so good. I pretty much got the front end back into shape, but I messed up the wheel arch and fender. I had to sand and use filler to repair this section. I never got it looking perfect, but I was able to fix it enough to where you probably wouldn't know that little accident ever happened. The hood wasn't a great fit, so I sanded it some so it would fit better and I could get an idea of how close I was to getting the correct shape for the right front fender. It took some time and effort, but I was able to fix the fender enough to where it looked halfway decent. I'll fine-tune it more after applying some primer. I continued working on the body by cutting away the supports, sanding away imperfections and mold lines, all to get the car ready for primer. This is the stage where you can really improve the appearance of your finished body by taking the time to remove these imperfections. I use a variety of tools for this, including sandpaper, sanding sticks, files, and a hobby knife. I'm not sure what the instructions say, but I definitely wanted to get the bumper installed at this stage of the build. The rear bumper was wider than the body, so I ended up doing some sanding so it was a little closer to being flush. I also test fit the taillights to ensure they'll fit when I'm ready to install them. Here I'm doing a little sanding on the spoiler while waiting for the glue to dry. Just like I said, here I'm trying to sand the body and rear bumper so they are closer to being flush. A lot of details were kind of hard to see on this body, so I used a pick tool to deepen the panel gaps. After that, I went over the entire body with some 600 grit sandpaper to help the primer adhere to the body. The side view mirrors needed some work to get them looking good. I rinsed away the dust before drying everything and applying primer. The primer will not only help with paint adhesion, but it also helps identify any imperfections on the body that I want to address. I could tell that the right fender was going to need a little more sanding to get it looking how I wanted. I wet sanded the entire body so it's ready for paint. After a little more work with the filler and some sandpaper, I primed just this section, trying to use the thick layers of primer to provide additional smoothing, and at this stage I was satisfied with how it looked. With the body at that stage, I wanted to design a custom cowl induction hood. I did so by first 3D scanning the hood included with the model kit, and then modeling my own custom hood in Blender. I've made a video showing this process, which I'll be sure to link in the description below. As you might recall, I had some issues with warping before, so this time I made the hood a little thicker and used different print settings. The result looked great, and there was no warping. I'm also surprised by how well it fit. It's a little narrow in the front, but not much sanding was required to get it to fit correctly. I didn't spend much time measuring or designing the hood, so this was a nice surprise. I quickly applied some primer to the hood after getting it to fit. It looks great on the car and gives the body a more custom look. This car won't have any kind of detailed engine bay, so I used shoe goo to glue the hood into place. After just a little more sanding in a few spots around the hood and one light coat of primer, the body is now complete and ready for paint. Before that though, I'll first be 3D printing and assembling the chassis, which I'll be covering in the next video in this series. Be sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week's video where I continue this project. If you'd rather not wait, the full build start to finish is available now to all Patreon supporters and to all channel members. You can click the join button below this video or become a patron with the link in the description for exclusive perks and to help make more content like this possible. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this series I'll be showing the complete build process of this RC 1/25th scale 1991 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. In today's video I continue the build by assembling the 3D printed FFR SD1 chassis I'm using for this car. If you missed last week's video, go ahead and watch that video first. In it I introduce the project, unbox the model kit, do some bodywork, and 3D print a custom hood. If you've seen the previous build series I did on the 2010 Ford Shelby GT500, you'll be familiar with this fully 3D printable variant of the FFR SD1 chassis. I'm using the exact same chassis for this build, only it's sized to fit AMT's 3rd gen Camaro model kits, like the 91 Camaro kit I'm using for this project, and the 83 Camaro kit I showed a while back. Both already printed parts and STL files are available, along with electronics and hardware kits. Links, as always, are below in the description. If you're building one of these cars along with me, refer to the chassis assembly tutorial linked below in the description. Although I'm building the chassis for a different body in the tutorial, the assembly process is exactly the same. As you can see, I already had most of the components I'll be using assembled and the chassis parts printed. All that's left to do is assemble the chassis. I decided for this car I wanted to paint the chassis flat black. This of course is optional, but I like the look of a painted chassis. I started by sanding all of the parts. This helps to smooth the surface a little and remove some imperfections. After that, I sprayed some Rust-Oleum flat black paint. All the parts looked nice after a few light coats. After the paint dried, I installed the rear axle assembly. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail regarding the assembly process, since again, I've already put together a detailed tutorial video. As always though, if you have any questions during the assembly process, please don't hesitate to send us an email or a message on Patreon. Once the rear axle and suspension is installed, I secure the rear chassis piece. You may recall I went with a torque arm rear suspension when I built the 83 Camaro a while back. Although that was more accurate, in this car I was able to run wires through the center of the chassis next to the drive shaft, which is easier to do with the torque arm not in the way. You'll see what I mean when I install the electronics. The next thing I did was install the steering servo. I often like to install it on the passenger side so it doesn't interfere with the steering wheel or steering column. This car will have a full depth interior. I now wanted to figure out how long I needed the drive shaft to be. I mocked everything up, measured, and cut the rod to the length that I needed. After that, I glued the ends onto the rod and installed it along with the motor. After that, I mounted the modular front suspension and steering assembly. I did need to remove a section of the chassis to get the steering to full lock. In the STL files that are available for download, you'll see that these corners have already been modified, so you won't need to cut them like I did here. I cut the steering rod and glued on the ends just like I did earlier for the drive shaft. I then installed it along with the steering arm. After that, all that's left to do to make it a roller is to install the wheels. I'm going with this set of custom 5-spoke wheels. At this point, the chassis is ready for the electronics and body to be mounted. I'll be covering that in the next video. Be sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week's video where I continue this project. If you'd rather not wait, the full build start to finish is available now to all Patreon supporters and to all channel members. You can click the join button below this video or become a patron with the link in the description for exclusive perks and to help make more content like this possible. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this series I'll be showing the complete build process of this RC 1/25th scale 1991 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. In today's video I'll be continuing the build by modifying the interior to fit the chassis, installing the electronics, and driving the car for the first time. If you're new to this build series, check out the playlist below in the description. In last week's video I assembled the chassis, and now I'm ready to figure out how I'm going to mount the body and interior to the chassis. As I've showcased before on this channel, there are different ways to secure the body and include an interior. For this car, I'll be using the full depth interior included with the model kit. I'll be modifying it a lot like how I modified the interior for the '83 Camaro build, which I showcased a while back. I started by figuring out where I was going to need to remove material, marked these sections with a marker, and then used a hot knife to cut away each section. I began by cutting a section out of the passenger side footwell for the steering servo, and then needed to remove the back seats so that the body would sit far back enough and low enough. Unlike the '83 Camaro kit I built previously, the rear seats on this kit are molded into the interior tub. This is less ideal since I can't include the rear seats on this car like I could for the 83 build. Everything else though is basically the same. As I've said before, it's basically a gradual process of cutting out sections so the body and interior will sit low enough on the chassis and isn't interfering with any moving parts. Just like with the body earlier in the build, I definitely wanted to do some work on the seats and dash to improve the appearance of these parts, but first I needed to figure out what sections will need to be removed. Although it only gained a tiny amount of space, I sanded this back section so I'll have more room for the electronics in the rear. So far everything was looking good. The interior was fitting well over the chassis in its current state, and the body was positioned correctly. At this point I wanted to figure out where I was going to place all of the electronics. This is the transmitter I'll be using. It's a FlySky FS GT3D. It's a nice budget RC transmitter, though keep in mind it doesn't offer as many features as the Radiolink transmitters you've seen me use previously. The receiver that's included is pretty large relative to the car, though I was able to make it fit by removing the case, as you'll see soon. The final two electronics I'll be using are a 2S LiPo battery and a 10A ESC. The receiver case is held together using 4 screws, which are removed and separated each half of the case. With the case removed, the receiver will be a lot easier to fit into the car. After some time spent brainstorming, I decided to place it around the driver's side footwell. I'll be putting the ESC in the rear and will have just enough space for the battery in the very front of the car. How and where I was going to run the wires was something I thought a lot about. I decided I'd cut some holes in the chassis to make it easier to run the wires from the ESC to the front of the car. It will still be a challenge to get all the wires routed, but it will work. I moved on to cutting another large hole so the receiver will fit. Fortunately, the driver's seat will partially obstruct the view of the receiver. It took a lot of hacking, but it fits, and there's room for the plugs behind the dash. I made a few modifications to the ESC, starting by removing the on-off switch to save space, and soldering on a longer plug for the motor and battery to connect to. Both the motor and battery will be at the very front of the car, so I need longer wires so they can be connected to the ESC, which will be mounted in the back. With the modifications made, I secured the ESC using double-sided tape. I also secured some of the wires in place so they wouldn't get in the way of the axle or suspension. Next, I secured the receiver and did the best I could to tidy up the wires. It's not the cleanest look, but it all fits. To save space, I decided to solder the motor wires directly to the motor rather than using a plug. At this point, I wanted to test everything to ensure it works. I adjusted the endpoint of the steering and also the trim. Here I'm making sure that the wheels will not rub against the body. So far so good, but I still needed to figure out how I was going to mount the body to the chassis. At this point, I installed some springs in the rear, since I'll need to figure out what ride height I want the car to have. I determined that this section of the body here was going to need to be removed for the chassis to sit correctly. Since with the interior tub sitting flat on the chassis, the body was positioned a little too low, I decided to use magnets which not only allow the body to be easily mounted and removed, but it will also lift the body up a few millimeters, closer to a stock ride height. I secured the magnets using super glue. I like to place a piece of paper between the magnets when gluing to ensure that the two magnets don't get glued together. Also, I found that I needed to add a third magnet, otherwise there wasn't enough strength to pick the car up by the body. And just like that, the body is mounted. I'm already really liking how the car is looking. One thing that I forgot to take into account was the thickness of the windows. The rear window fits just fine, but the thick front windshield pushes up the front of the car. The best solution I could come up with was to make my own windshield using thin clear plastic. I noticed that the battery wires were much longer than what they needed to be, so I cut them shorter. There's just enough space in the front for the battery to fit. For now, I just used a little tape to secure it. Eager to see how the car drives, I did a quick test drive. The car works great, no wheel rub, and with the soft rear springs, I like how the back squats when accelerating. The battery kept falling out though, so I cut a piece of Velcro to use instead of the tape. I really couldn't be happier with the car at this stage, though there is still some more work that needs to be done before I'm ready to paint. Starting with the seats, I needed to modify them so I could place each over the top of the electronics that I placed in the footwells. They can now sit far forward enough to partially hide the receiver and servo. Next, I cut off the ends of the front axles. Right now there's more sticking out than what I'd like. This is best to do before assembling the front suspension assembly, but as long as you're careful, it can be done at this stage. Like I said before, I couldn't be happier with how the car is right now. It drives great, everything is mounted and working. All it needs now is some paint and finishing details. I'll be showing all of that in next week's video. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss next week's video where I complete this project. If you'd rather not wait, remember that the full build start to finish is available now to all Patreon supporters and to all channel members. You can click the join button below or become a patron with the link in the description for exclusive perks and to help make more content like this possible. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome. In this series I'll be showing the complete build process of this RC 125th scale 1991 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. In today's video I'll be completing this build by painting the car, adding the final details, and doing some driving. If you're new to this series, be sure to check out the playlist below in the description where you can see the previous videos I made showing the complete build process. As you might recall from last week, I modified the interior to fit the chassis and got the car up and running. All that's left to do now is cosmetic stuff like paint and adding the finishing details. I decided to start by wet sanding the primer that I had previously applied to the body. I used some 600 grit sandpaper to ensure there is no dust or imperfections and to help with paint adhesion. After that, I applied this awesome looking blue metallic paint from Rust-Oleum. It looks teal in bright light and a darker blue in lower light. I was excited to try this paint out, and I thought it would give the car a nice custom look. This thicker Rust-Oleum paint can be a little challenging to apply smooth, but I did the best I could to lay it down even. Here's how the body looked after the color coats. Again, I love this color on this car. It looks even better in person than on camera. While giving the paint plenty of time to dry, I moved on to the interior. After doing a little final sanding, I was ready to paint the interior. I decided to paint the interior black since there are a lot of large holes, so I figured that it would look better to have the black interior and black chassis somewhat match. I painted the majority of the interior flat black except for a few parts which I painted gloss black, such as the dash. I'll later use a brush to add more details to the interior. Although it's all black, I like to use both gloss and flat black to add a little more detail to the interior and help differentiate hard plastic parts from fabric, carpeting, and seats. While waiting for the interior to dry, I decided to paint the wheels chrome. I'll also be painting a set of brake rotors. To help smooth the paint a little more and remove some minor imperfections like small pieces of dust, I hand polished the body. I thoroughly washed the body and then began applying masking for 2 black stripes that I would paint down the entire length of the car. After masking for the stripes, I carefully painted black stripes using an airbrush, making sure no paint would get past the masking tape. The stripes turned out looking great, and by this time the other parts I had painted were dry. With the stripes painted, I applied the clear coat. Like on other builds, I applied it pretty thick to try and make it as durable against scratches and chips as possible. I also once again used polish to help smooth the clear coat. I'm already really liking how the body looks, and I've still got a lot more details that I'll be adding. I began painting more details by masking each section and carefully painting using an airbrush. The body was looking even better with these details added. There were just a few more things I wanted to paint on the body, including all the lights. For the taillights, I wanted to back them with silver paint before installing. The final touch was carefully painting the Z28 emblems and painting black around the windshield. To finish the taillights, I used a Sharpie to go around the border and then glued them to the body. I glued both the rear window and front windshield. The rear window was not a great fit, so I ended up needing to use super glue and clamping it into place until it dried. The super glue left some haze, which I was able to remove with Meguiar's Plastex. There was no slot or hole for the side view mirrors to go into, so they were a little tricky to glue into place and make look symmetrical. After doing a little sanding so they'll fit, I tried to improve the appearance of these chrome headlights by again using a Sharpie to color the outer edges, and I used Tamiya Smoke as a wash to dull the chrome finish a little. At this point, the body is complete, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. With the body looking great, I next turned my attention to the interior. There wasn't much I planned on doing. I started by painting a few details gloss black, including the center console and armrests. I also painted the Z28 emblem red. I glued the steering wheel, dash, and seats. The paint on the wheels and rotors turned out nice, though I needed to make the holes larger on the rotors before I could glue them to the wheels. After that, I installed the tires and mounted the wheels to the chassis. The interior tub slots into the rear, though I needed to use glue to secure the front part of the interior to the body. The car is looking great at this stage, though there are still a few things I wanted to add, the first being the rear view mirror. This would have been easier to add prior to gluing the interior, however after painting the backside flat black, I was still able to install it. I used some 3D printed tailpipe pieces, which I painted silver, and I added the rear license plate. The license plate seemed a little large and was hard to fit, but it's on. I cut some small pieces of styrene, which I'll mount the tailpipe pieces to, since they don't sit low enough without these pieces. Finally, I did the best I could to paint the side view mirrors. At this point, the car is complete, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. The custom details and the color just look so nice on this car. Although the interior is pretty well hacked up, having it full depth looks nice, and the black color helps it to blend into the chassis. Just like I talked about in the previous video, the car drives great, no wheel rub or any other issues. It's smooth, and I like how the rear end squats when accelerating. All around, a really fun car to drive. So that brings us to the end of this build series. I had a lot of fun putting this car together, and I hope you all enjoyed watching. Remember to check out the links below in the description if you'd like to build a similar car, and be sure to be on the lookout for some more videos coming soon. Also, you can follow Make It RC at the social media links in the description for sneak peeks at upcoming projects and videos. Also, if you'd like to help support this channel and make more content like this possible, you can click the join button below or become a member on Patreon for early access to videos and exclusive content. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.